Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, YWCA Northern New Jersey CEO, with you on this Wednesday afternoon. Thank you for taking some time with us today. We're so happy to be able to connect with you. And even though the restrictions in New Jersey are lifting and people are getting out more, this is still a great opportunity for us to stay connected and be talking about topics that inspire us and educate us. And today we are focusing on part of our Why Women Vote series that the YWCA of Northern New Jersey has committed to during this 2020 year. As we know, we are gearing up for an election of our president and other key positions this fall. And our national organization, YWCA USA, commissioned a report to be able to get a sense of what were some of the most important issues to women today as they are getting ready to vote. And we have identified a core group of those and have been bringing you conversations focused on educating you on some of these topics. And today's topic was very high on the list. Across demographics for women was the issue of gun violence in our country. As we know, gun violence claims tens of thousands of lives each year, and weak gun laws and access to firearms have made it very easy for people to take their own lives and also to take the lives of others. We've had many grassroots movements across the country that are taking charge and inspiring our local communities, as well as impacting government policies around gun control. And so happy to have these two wonderful activists and leaders in our communities to join us today to talk through this issue. With us, we have Larisa Mendez Downes, who is a volunteer election lead for Moms Demand Action, the New Jersey chapter. And we also have Karen Kanter, who is a member of the New Jersey Brady's State Executive Committee. Brady's United Against Gun Violence. And they're both our guests today, and they're here to share some information about the work that they're doing to fight for public safety measures and protect us from gun violence. So I thank you both for taking the time to join us today to have this discussion. And for those of you watching, please feel free to send us questions in our chat. Also, feel free, we will link you to both of these organizations so that you can learn more about them, get more involved with them, follow them on social media. And we encourage you to do that as well. So with that, we'll start with Larissa. So Larissa, thank you so much for taking the time. Can you tell us a little bit about Moms Demand Action and your organization, how it was started, and the work that you're doing here in New Jersey? And within that, obviously, we'll talk about the scope of gun violence problem here in the United States and in New Jersey as well.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So a little bit about Moms to start with. Moms was founded in 2012, the day after the Sandy Hook shooting, which we remember was December 2012, when 20 children and 6 educators were killed in Newtown, Connecticut. The day after that, a stay-at-home mom, Shannon Watts, tried to look for the equivalent of Mothers Against Drunk Driving online, didn't find it. And so she started a Facebook page, and basically that's snowballed into a now 6 million supporter strong organization under the Everytown umbrella. We have chapters in every state. Under this Everytown umbrella is Mayors Against Illegal Guns, the Everytown Survivor Network, Students Demand Action, which was formed after the Parkland shooting in February of 2018, and us. And it's so hard to sort of accurately describe the gun violence epidemic in the United States because it's so large. I have myself, even though I think about this pretty much every day of my life, still sort of have a hard time wrapping my head around it. But basically, we're at a point where there are about 400 million guns in the United States. We have 100 people a day are killed, and that twice that number are injured daily. And so you can imagine that that's lives ended, families and communities shattered, medical bills, and lasting physical and psychological effects for those who survive a shooting. Gun violence is now the second leading cause of death for children in America, and that's children defined as 1 to 19 years old. And it is the first leading cause for Black children in America. We also know that the Black and Brown communities are disproportionately affected by this. In fact, Black Americans are 10 times more likely to die from gun violence than white Americans. And Black children and Hispanic children in cities are more likely to experience gun violence at higher rates than white children. And exposure includes, witnessing violence, hearing gunshots, and knowing individuals who've been shot. When children are exposed to this kind of violence, communities and schools often don't have the resources to implement healing and trying to end that cycle. And so that cycle continues to perpetuate time after time. And apologies for my dog in the background.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, I thank you for sharing all that. It definitely gives us a good perspective on the conversation. So I'm not surprised that this issue came up for women across the country as being a top, voting issue. Can you speak a little bit about why, you feel this became a voting issue for them, and what voters, who are concerned about gun violence can do in terms of their upcoming election? How can they, learn more about their candidates and be connected, to voting people in who can address this issue for us?
Absolutely. The truth is that who you vote into office makes a difference. And I know often people don't believe that because the wheels of government can move slowly. But I think the most relevant example that I can give you that also helps to answer the question is, and here comes a dog, sorry, is that over 95% of Americans support universal background checks. And yet the Senate has failed to even bring that bill passed in early 2019, even to the floor to discuss it. And so if 95% of Americans want universal background checks, which are the baseline of assuring that private gun sales are validated, that people on the no-fly list, domestic abusers, others who shouldn't have guns, if that's the basic legislation that we can't even get passed, then there's a problem. There's a disconnect between who's in office and what the electorate wants. And so that sort of part, that for me encapsulates why voting is so important. People who are in office should not be beholden to the gun lobby as they have been for many years. Now, the contrast to that is, for example, here in New Jersey, we have some of the strongest gun laws in the country. And we also have some of the lowest gun deaths in the country. And that's not a coincidence. And so it makes a difference who you choose to represent you to make that legislation and to see it through. Before the midterm 2018 elections, gun violence and gun violence prevention was a third rail topic. Politicians wouldn't touch it. And just even, for example, looking at the debates leading up to the Democratic candidate nomination process, it was brought up in almost every debate, and the candidates would each talk about it. And so the louder we talk about gun violence, the more that we underscore what an impact it has and its connection to systemic racism and to dangerous patriarchal institutions, the sooner that we can address how we can address it at the legislative and congressional level. So that, I think, is a big part of how we do gun violence prevention at the electoral level. We have to go to the polls. We have to register. In fact, I think from what I've seen, research has shown that young people, when they're registering to vote, if they get to the polls, vote in similar or equal to numbers as baby boomers. And so it's so important. This became a huge movement for the young people after the Parkland 2018 massacre and in Florida at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And so I think that has really energized the movement, and it's about getting roles and holding them accountable to what Americans actually want from their congressional representatives.
Well, thank you. Let's see. So thank you so much, Larissa, for sharing all that. Could you please share with us a little bit about the Be Smart program? I know now that we've had so many children home with COVID, um, that was a initiative, and that's been launched. And can you also speak to a little bit what parents and guardians and others can do to help reduce gun violence at home?
Absolutely. Be Smart is one of my favorite programs that we do at Moms. It's completely apolitical. It doesn't discuss legislation. At the very basic, it's about keeping kids safe. Of the 100 deaths that I talked about earlier that happen every day, about 8 of those are children. And so whether it's because of an unintentional shooting where a child gains access to an unsecured gun and hurts themselves or another child, or even suicide, Be Smart emphasizes that the onus of safe gun ownership is at the hands of the adult. We often hear of a 4-year-old gaining access to a gun, shooting a younger sibling, an older sibling. A 4-year-old should not have the responsibility of keeping, the gun away from themselves. And now, especially now that children are at home, they're bored, they're isolated in some cases, it's vital that guns are stored securely and, importantly, away from ammunition. Parents often think that if they talk to their children and caution them against if they see a gun and telling a guardian or something, that's an important conversation to have. But the truth of the matter is that kids are curious. 70% of children under 10 know where their parents keep their weapons. People who have children we know that they'll get into anything. And it can happen, and unfortunately it does happen. So Be Smart is actually, the SMART is an acronym, and it's secure weapons safely, model responsible behavior around guns, ask others, and this is more relevant when we're out of quarantine, about whether their guns are stored safely and securely, recognizing the roles of guns in suicide, and then telling others about the Be Smart message. So it's a very basic message. We go out to do it to whatever, your book club, your knitting club, your library. We're happy to present it. It's a 20-minute conversation, and we're happy to talk to people who come and want to learn about basic gun ownership, security, and
Well,
safety.
that's wonderful. And maybe we can have you on another Facebook Live, another YWTV episode to just focus on that discussion.
We'd love that.
I think that that's really important for the parents in our community and anyone who has, children coming in and out of their house to get that direction and hear. So, although we'll later in this broadcast talk with Karen about this topic of domestic violence during, this time that we've been quarantining as well, I wondered if you can just take a moment to talk to us a little bit about extreme risk protection orders and how they can be used to reduce domestic violence gun deaths.
Absolutely. So this is unfortunately another way in which the United States is unique among the industrialized world. Domestic violence and gun violence tend to have an unfortunate intersection. And so abusers with firearms are 5 times more likely to kill their victims. And of course, it just really exacerbates that power and control dynamic that is inherent to a domestic abuser relationship. So I have some notes because I want to make sure I get my numbers right. But every month, about 52 women in the United States are killed by an intimate partner, and 1 million women alive today have been reported being shot or shot at by their partner. And then I think what's really crucial too is in more than half of the mass shootings over the past decade, the perpetrator doing the shooting, has had a history of domestic violence. So I say all that to sort of bring perspective to that intersection of gun violence, domestic violence that I talked about. What ERPO, extreme risk protection orders, sometimes are called red flag laws, they vary state by state. But what they allowed to do is for a person in New Jersey in particular is to ask a court to keep a family or household member from gaining access to a firearm or ammunition. The person can ask the court, they fill out an application on njcourts.gov, and they can ask a court to remove weapons or ammunition, as I said, from a current or former spouse, current or former domestic partner, dating partner, somebody that they share a child with, or somebody who's in the household with them. And what this allows the authorities to do is temporarily remove that firearm or ammunition so that that person can't use it to harm themselves in some cases or others in a domestic violence situation. Obviously, there is another entire Facebook Live topic for domestic violence and all the reasons that it's so complicated and what can keep a person from um, reaching out and doing that kind of order, but it's certainly there, and it's been shown to reduce gun violence deaths as well. And so it's great that it was passed in New Jersey in, I believe, 2018, and then it was implemented last fall.
That's wonderful. And just for anybody watching, we will link the page for Center for Hope and Safety, which is Bergen County's domestic violence resource program. They have a hotline as well as a safe shelter and support programs available, and counselors that can also help guide you on these types of issues. So we will link that in the comments in case anybody needs it. And also, you can check out a earlier YWTV episode we did about a month ago that included a conversation about domestic violence with our Center for Hope and Safety director, Julie Miner, as well as our conversation about child abuse and how both of these issues have, really been impacted in a very challenged way with what, quarantining and how we've been living, during this time. So, Larissa, thank you for so much information. Please sit tight. We're going to pull you back in, in a moment, and we're going to bring Karen on now and talk a little bit to her. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, everyone, Karen Kanter, as I said, is from Brady, United Against Gun Violence, a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1974 and advocates for gun control and against gun violence. Karen is also a member of the New Jersey Coalition to Prevent Domestic Violence, the NAACP, and the League of Women Voters. Welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for joining us today. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're currently involved in through the Brady campaign?
Hi. Well, first I want to thank Northern New Jersey YWCA for holding this presentation. It's so important because it has been called a public health epidemic. And as Larissa cited, the numbers are astounding. And to highlight what she said is that more Americans have been killed by guns since 1968 than all U.S. wars combined. So that's just something to think about. And it's one of the reasons that this has been deemed a public health issue. The intersection, by the way, of COVID-19 and guns is that when people apply for guns, they have to have, or they're supposed to have, a background check. So the coronavirus hit New Jersey and every place in mid-March. And what happened from the week of March 16th to the 22nd was that NICS, which is our background check system, had its highest surge of background checks that it ever has since it was started in 1998. So there are now more guns out there. In addition, I just read just today that as people are calling for, let's say, people are naming it defunding police departments. Well, that is a misnomer. That is not a good term to use because it has people frightened now that the police won't be available. It's not what it means. It means maybe some monies will be shifted from the police department. But as a result of that, more people again are buying guns. So that means that more people have guns. And in that regard, we need to try to get better laws passed in order to reduce gun violence. What Brady is focused on, again, we are focused on making sure that people who shouldn't have guns don't get guns. And that means we have to have background checks. Unfortunately, there are a number of loopholes. One is that people can buy them online and they don't have to, and they can bypass the background check system. Another way is through gun shows, which they don't happen, by the way, in New Jersey, but they do happen around us in Pennsylvania and in many, many other states. But there are often private gun sales where the gun dealers do not check on the background. In addition, there's something called the Charleston loophole. And it was called the Charleston loophole because when in that horrendous shooting down in Charleston, South Carolina, in the church, the shooter was able to get a gun. He shouldn't have been able to get a gun because he had been guilty of drug possession, but he got it because his request for guns bypassed the 3-day waiting period. So if you have to wait more than 3 days, then you automatically get the gun. Now, as Larissa mentioned, in New Jersey, we have a lot of very, very good gun laws, which makes us a much safer state. But these are federal laws that need to get passed. And again, as Larissa said, the importance and the value of voting is that in 2018, we were able to shift the House of Representatives and voted in people who supported reshaping gun laws so that we had gun safety. And they passed a lot of these bills, such as background checks. But once it got to the Senate, which is dominated by people who do not believe in these bills, it stopped. So we can do this at the polls. And I want to emphasize this, but we have to make sure that we have candidates who support gun safety laws.
Well, thank you. You've given us so much information about some ideas about legislation and the elections. Can you talk to us a little bit from the racial justice perspective of how gun violence is handled differently in Black communities, and give us some insights on that discussion, which is, always important, but, clearly very, very important at this particular moment in time?
It's a tough question, and it's a very important question. And as a white woman, I am not, and I have been fortunate to not be personally impacted by gun violence, and I'm always learning more about it. So I want to give that caveat. Black and brown communities are impacted more than white communities. As was mentioned before, Black people are 10 times more likely to die from gun homicides than white people. And let's narrow in on the police gun shootings. Between 2015 and 2020, in the African American community, police shootings were 30 per million. In white communities, it was 12 per million. That's a big difference. So, and the other thing is we have to also think about why does media cover the white shootings more than they cover Black shootings? That's only been recent that this kind of coverage has happened. But in the past, social media, particularly our newspapers, oftentimes did not include shootings that happened in our Black and brown communities. So either people weren't aware of it, or there was a lack of power behind this kind of situation, because that community daily has to face gun shootings. We were horrified when we heard about the gun shootings at Parkland, at Sandy Hook, at Columbine. But daily, so many people in poor Black and brown neighborhoods have to figure out ways to get through their day in dealing with this kind of life. And so, yes, it has been very traumatizing for members of that community.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Maybe let's bring Larissa back into the conversation to join us as well. Hi, Larissa.
Hello.
Well, you both really have given us so much good information. I can even see for those that are watching that they're obviously feeling very engaged to the topic as well. You know, obviously, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about domestic violence and kind of the uptick that we've seen, you know, during this time when we were quarantining due to COVID-19. You know, maybe we can, you know, once again just focus the conversation a little bit more there on ideas for, you know, domestic violence survivors, anyone who's you know, living in this situation, you know, ways that they can be supported and ways that they can get support. So ways that we in the community can support them too.
Well, I'd just like to add that, you know, in terms of the AirPo laws, you know, for the DVROs, which are the domestic violence restraining orders, a crime already has to have been committed, right? In order to get that order from the court. But an AirPo, on the other hand, is designed to prevent a crime from being committed. So it would be so if there is a gun in the house, the person who is the potential victim is able to get some help from our law enforcement people by preventing that crime and by getting that gun out of the house. Because if a gun is used, it's usually lethal, right? We know that. So we want to get the guns out of the house. A DVRO, on the other hand, there has to have been a crime committed. But to get an AirPo, you do not. You can call the police. You can call your police department and have the officer submit that application for you if you are yourself not comfortable doing it.
That's correct. And thanks, Karen, for bringing that up, because that is very important. You can either file it with the court yourself or reach out to law enforcement to do that as well.
So one of our viewers, Missy Flo, shared a comment saying, "I thought online gun sales were stopped, and perhaps that's just on Facebook."
It's in New Jersey.
Anyone want to speak to that?
In New Jersey, it stopped because we have such good gun laws. But federally, and then we also have the problem with ghost guns and 3D print guns. And there are all these laws, right, Larissa, that need to be mandated on the federal level. And that's why voting, as you said, was so important.
Exactly. In fact, one of the things at the federal level that we're still missing, that in fact we just passed at the beginning of 2017 here in New Jersey, was to close the boyfriend loophole. And
Right.
as we mentioned with the ERPO laws, what that's done is you don't have to be married, which is the federal basis of the law. If you can ask for this type of removal if you're married, but if you're in a domestic partnership or have a partner stalking you and you're not married, the laws don't protect you in the same way at the federal level, and so that's yet another way. And I believe, and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering it incorrectly, but the Violence Against Women Act, which has been held up in the Senate again, had language to this regard, and up to recently, VAWA has had bipartisan support,
I
and
know.
first year in the cycle for many years that it hasn't passed because the gun lobby objected to some of the laws that would make it harder for domestic violence abusers to get arms and ammunition.
Absolutely.
Well, as we get ready to close out, are there any kind of parting thoughts both of you or either of you would like to share to our viewers to give them some last thoughts on this conversation?
To vote, please. It really makes a difference. It might not feel like it. Our primaries are in July now because of the COVID crisis. You still have time to register or check on your registration if you've moved. It makes a difference. Do it. It's your voice. And they should, your representatives should be your voice at the state and federal levels.
I want to support what Larissa has said, and I also want to add that safe storage. If you are one of the people who has a gun, and more people do, make sure that your house has safe storage, which means that guns and ammo are locked away separately, and that if your child goes to visit somebody, that their house also supports safe storage. This will reduce needless tragedies.
Well, we'll also try to put a link here to a program that we talked about with Larissa, so that people can contact Moms Demand Action to come and present the information locally with them and different organizations and opportunities. And even now, when people may still be doing some work virtually, I'm sure that through technology, you'd still be able to share that information with the group. And again, we will. I'll commit now that we'll bring you back on at another time, Larissa, to share more details specifically focused on that conversation. I think it's really key and important.
I look forward to it.
And I really want to thank the two of you for sharing this information. And for those of you watching, thank you for so many of the comments. Obviously, you're both, very, lots of gratitude in the community for the work that you're doing. And thank you for joining us to share this information. For those of you watching, if there's someone in your life that you really wished had seen this conversation today, but maybe hasn't joined us right now, this will be available on our Facebook page. You can share it. You can direct them here to be able to watch it. And after some time, it'll always be on our YouTube channel and be accessible there as well. Just go to our YWTV section. But we do encourage you to share this information. Again, this is a big year with not only a presidential election, but plenty other of key offices that are up for vote. And, as our YWCA USA Why Women Vote report showed, and we'll link the report here too in case some women would like to read it and see that as well. This is a key issue and a top issue for women across demographics. So we encourage you to listen again if you need to share this with other, women and individuals in your life for sure. Make sure you do your research on your candidates to see that they're aligned with your belief systems and your values on this issue and all the other issues that are important to you when you're voting. And we thank you so much again for the work that both of you do in the community. For those of you watching, we hope that you can join us later this week. Tomorrow we have a Peak Performing Arts Center joining us at 10 a.m. to have a fun morning for our littles, a little bit of arts entertainment to give us some activities to do with them and some options that you can connect with online for them as well. And Friday, a really, really important conversation we hope you can join us with. It's Mom to Mom, Parenting Black Sons in Today's World. And I'll be leading this conversation myself, a mother of a son who is white, with 3 very well-respected Black women that are in our community and are on our board, and sharing, a very open and genuine conversation on this topic. So we hope that you join us to learn more, educate yourself on some of the challenges and why it is so important. Moms get it done. We know that's why Moms Demand Action has been so successful. And, we want to make sure that the moms have a full understanding of some of the differences and challenges so that we can be supportive of our, Black mamas around us. So everyone, have a great rest of your day. We encourage you to take care of yourselves and take care of people around you. And we will see you hopefully again tomorrow. And again, Karen and Larissa, thank you so much for being with us and sharing such key information. Bye-bye all. Be well.